Without a doubt, this is one of the hardest sewing patterns I've tried in a while. Hey guys, welcome to the Sewing Report. I'm Jen. This channel is all about making sewing and crafts fun and approachable, and we're gonna get into a sewing pattern I recently tried for a super cute lunch bag, but it was not without some heartache. So this is gonna be sort of a pattern review slash sharing some of my failures with you slash just showing off something I made. Buckle up, and yes, there is a buckle on these lunch bags because we're gonna be talking about the Grab Some Grub 2.0 pattern from By Annie Patterns. Now, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know that I've been sort of on a kick doing patterns from Annie of By Annie Patterns, and I saw this and I was like, this lunch bag is so freaking cute. I want to try to make one. I've tried some of her other patterns like the meshing around bag and the Petit Four cubes. And these, I just thought, I haven't made any lunch bags before, but this pattern just really struck me. Like, I loved the pattern art on the cover, and I just thought it looked so cool. I loved the design. And I wanted to share some things that went right with this project, some things that went wrong, and just some tips for you if you're gonna attempt to make this pattern. I haven't seen any videos other than Annie's on it, or a lot of pattern reviews. This pattern has been around for a while, and it is around $10. You can get it in quite a few different places. I don't sell it myself, but you can get digital versions or paper versions on Annie's website, and there are also a lot of stockists around if you want to give it a shot. One thing I really liked about it was that you could make quilted or non-quilted versions, and Annie kind of has some signature techniques for her projects. So definitely check out her YouTube channel. And one thing about her patterns is that many of them come with add-on videos. They're not billed as complete step-by-step tutorials, but I feel like the videos give you enough information and enough instruction that it makes the pattern much easier to do. So I'm not going to be doing a full-out tutorial of the lunch bags because I feel like that would take away from Annie's videos that are already done and show you her techniques. She has a binding technique that's a little bit different than what I was used to, so I wanted to use her technique for the binding, which I'll get to a little bit later because in my opinion, that's the most difficult and frustrating part of doing this Grab Some Grub sewing pattern. This is something I'll do on the channel if the pattern designer already has a how-to video, a step-by-step, or videos like Annie's. I am not going to do them here because, again, I don't want to take away from their video and potentially siphon views, especially if they have a YouTube tutorial. Just out of respect for those designers, I know sometimes on these types of videos, I'm like, this isn't a step-by-step video, or this isn't a, can you do a tutorial? I'll do tutorials on my own creations if I made them up myself or like kind of designed them, or if the person, maybe if the person doesn't have videos, but if they have videos, just out of respect to them, I'm not gonna do them here. So definitely check out Annie's add-on videos for this pattern because they were super helpful, and I would certainly watch those before I start the pattern. This one was a little bit hard to figure out. You're like, okay, how does it come together? So what you end up doing is I made the non-quilted version, and I went with her suggestion to do iron-on vinyl to make the inside wipeable, easily cleanable, especially since these are lunch bags. You're going to be putting food inside them and other stuff that could leak or just get stuff in them. So I feel like doing just regular fabric would be a little bit impractical, even though you can wash them. I just thought, you know, wiping them out clean with the water resistant fabric on the inside was a good idea. And you can see my review and demo of the laminated fabric product. I used the ThermoWeb Heat and Bond iron-on vinyl in glossy, and I do have another video kind of showing you how to use that product. I do recommend it. There are a few others like them that are different brands, or you can buy oilcloth or laminated cotton and put those on the inside of the bags. So you have like a long piece that you start off with, and then you sew on the other components. Like this one has a really cool clear pocket on the back for like IDs or little notes. I used a glitter vinyl that I got from So Hungry Hippie, and I thought it worked out great. And then on the inside, you use By Annie mesh fabric and her fold over elastic to make a really cute inside pocket that you could put like an ice pack or other stuff inside. I chose to go with the buckle option. You can either do the like slide release buckle or like a D-ring and then a lobster claw or something like that. I just thought this looked cute, and I had gotten some 1-inch buckles on Etsy. I'll link the buckles below. They were pretty inexpensive, and I bought a bunch of stuff from the shop, so I think the shipping ended up being free. So a couple things about this pattern. I used the Brother CS7000 die sewing machine to sew this bag together. I would say any sewing machine that's like just a regular sewing machine, it's gonna struggle through something with lots of layers or very bulky fabrics like these lunch bags. So if you're using a heavier duty machine, like I also have a sale, right, that might have made things a little easier, or if you're using another more like heavy duty machine, it would certainly have less frustration for you. There are certain parts of this project that have like 8 layers of fabric, and at that point, the machine starts to struggle, and I had to manually crank it to get it to go through. I also ended up using a 100/16 titanium like tipped needle that I do sell in the Etsy shop. So if you're interested in those, I do have those in the shop. And that did seem to help cut down on skipped stitches. And I used a 40 weight thread, which is a little bit heavier, to do the like bulkier parts. So right off the bat, there are a few pieces that you interface with Pellon Shaped Flex 101, and also the inside of the bag is insulated with Annie's Soft and Stable, which is a product I would recommend for this product, but the pattern instructions call for you to interface the strap tabs for the buckle. Don't do this. When I tried to use the interface pieces, the sewing machine literally could not sew through all the layers. So I ended up remaking the pieces without interfacing, and then it went fine. If you have just a regular sewing machine like I do, and I've been sewing on this machine for the past 1.5 years to do beginner sewing projects here, skip that step. The other parts were fine with the interfacing, but because this ended up being 8 layers, like this here is 8 layers of fabric, and then you add on 4 more layers with this stuff, and it just was too much for the machine. The binding though, that was, in my opinion, the most frustrating part of this whole project. How it works is you start off with like one long piece for the body of the bag, and then you sew on the sides of the bag, and then you end up binding, like you start off at one end, you go all the way around, bottom, and then up the side. This part I struggled with a lot. I think it was just due to all of the layers and whatnot. This is a project that, in my opinion, is kind of hard to make it look perfect. So if you're one of those perfectionist sewists, this one may give you some trouble and it may bother you. There are certainly some parts of the bags, and I kind of learned from I made 2 at once. The fabrics are a mix of a few different lines. This main print that's sort of like a grid pattern with different colors, I think this is a Heather Bailey cotton sateen. I got it years ago off her website. I don't think it's still in print. Then I also used Carolyn Friedlander's Karkai collection. I don't know if you're pronouncing it right, for the green fabric. The blue fabric is actually a fabric I've had for a while. This one is a Hoffman fabric. It's like that the Me and You collection from a while ago. So that's the light blue. And then I also, and then the pink and purple fabric is also Carolyn Friedlander's Karkai. Sorry guys, I believe those are all like out of print fabrics. I'm trying to use my old fabrics. I don't always use the latest fabrics. So I know sometimes people ask me in the comments like, what fabric are you using? But I feel a little bit bad because it's gonna be hard to get most of these fabrics. There is a lot of binding on this project. So the first step when you are just sewing the sides on, the instructions tell you to sew with the 1/4 inch seam allowance. When I did this and then I put on the binding, There were definitely areas, and I'll show you with some photos, where the binding didn't go that far. So the initial stitches where I sewed the sides on were visible in the final product. So on the second bag I sewed a little bit less than a 1/4 inch. So I would maybe sew it at like somewhere in between 1/8 of an inch and a 1/4 of an inch. So sew like a little bit in between there, because you don't really want those stitches showing up in your final project. You want the stitches to be hidden. And there were certainly some parts, so you put the binding on one side first, and then you fold it over, and then you stitch it down on the other side. Because the stitches on the outside were going to be more visible, I decided to first sew the binding on the inside first, which is opposite of what Annie shows in the videos. But I did this because I knew the stitches on the outside of the bag would be more visible, so I wanted those to look quote unquote prettier. There were still some areas where my stitching on the back side was a bit uneven, but you know what? I ended up being okay with that. And I chose to do a thread that was in a coordinating color so it would kind of blend in. You could certainly choose a thread that pops out a little bit more, but because I wanted the mistakes or like the flaws in my sewing project to be kind of minimized, I thought that this was a good move. And I would also say that choosing busier fabrics for the grab and go lunch bag will also kind of do a lot to kind of minimize or hide things that you're not super happy with that happened in the sewing process. So that's a good tip if you're a little bit worried about it. Don't use solid fabrics. Use fabrics that have a lot going on, because people are not going to notice as much if something goes wrong. But overall, I do think, even despite my failures with this project or my mistakes, they still look really cute. So I am happy with the way they turned out. I would not recommend for very beginner or very new sewists. This shouldn't be your very first sewing project, because you're probably going to want to throw your sewing machine out the window. On like a scale of difficulty, I would put this pattern, and I'm kind of an intermediate sewist, I would put this pattern at easily a 7 or an 8, only because it is, in my opinion, hard to get the binding to look perfect. Not that any sewing project is perfect, but I found it difficult to get it to the point where I was super happy with it. There were some nights, this took me, from cutting to sewing, I had to rewatch the videos a few times to like really get the instructions. This took me about a week to do these 2 bags. And again, I am filming things at the same time. There were a couple nights though where I just got so frustrated with the binding, I just had to like quit for the night and be like, you know what, I'm gonna come back to it tomorrow. Because if I keep going, something bad is gonna happen. Have you guys ever heard the saying, nothing good happens after midnight? Maybe there's something to it, because it was always when I was like really tired and it was like 2 a.m. Now, when Annie demonstrates this technique in her add-on videos, she does have a section or something she calls like refining the seam. I think one thing about sewing around all these curves is that it's really easy for your seam allowance to get out of whack. So she kind of goes along and checks, and if her seam allowance is really like off for a section, she goes ahead and redoes it. I did that in quite a few parts, and it did help, because there's some areas where you end up folding over the binding and wanting it to just go past the stitch line of the other side of the binding, and there were areas that were just really out of whack. So I thought that tip was super helpful. If you don't have Wonder Clips or an off-brand Wonder Clip, you will need those for this project. I would highly recommend those. It was much easier than using pins or anything like that. And full disclosure, I bought name brand legit Wonder Clips like several years ago. After about 5 years, the clips, like I guess all the stress of holding the materials together, the bottoms ended up bending and breaking, so I ended up buying new versions. I decided to try the off-brand, like Amazon sketchy companies, and so far the clips actually seem to be holding up pretty well. So if you are wondering if you should get like the off-brand Wonder Clips, I haven't noticed a difference between the 2 products, and one of them is obviously much cheaper. So if you want to go for the name brand, you can, but in my opinion, you don't have to, because the other ones, you know, and again, we can get into the intellectual property infringements later, but if you are on a budget and you don't have the money to spend on Wonder Clips, the third-party rando ones seem to be doing fine, in my opinion, and they were inexplicably cheaper. So if you're on a budget, you know, hey, no shame. We got to do what we got to do. But I would highly recommend you get some form of wonder clips for this project because I use like all of my wonder clips to do the binding. You're definitely going to need them. So would I make this pattern again? Yeah, I thought they turned out really cute, even despite the shortcomings of my own sewing skills. This was definitely one of those projects though that had a lot of frustrating moments and tediousness. So if you just like easygoing sewing projects that are stress-free, this one's not for you. But if you can get through the binding parts, I would say go for it. I really do like this pattern. I like the way it came together. This binding part was just like not my favorite. I'll just leave it at that. But if you've made By Annie patterns before, she does use binding a lot in her projects. So if you try some of her other patterns, you're gonna have the same types of techniques. This one I think was just kind of challenging for me because this is not like a lay flat project. Like she has some projects that like project bags where you're just binding like two-dimensional flat surfaces. This one I think because it's three-dimensional just kind of added on to the difficulty in my opinion. But I still think that this pattern is super cute. I love the way they turned out. I don't know what I'm gonna do with these bags yet. I work from home so I don't need to take a lunch anymore. And so we'll see, maybe I can gift them to someone in the near future. Christmas, anybody? I don't know, but that is my review and just overall thoughts on the Grab Some Grub 2.0 pattern from By Annie. If you made this, let me know below in the comments. Do you agree with me? Was the binding the hardest part for you? And if you have any other just general observations about the By Annie pattern line, also feel free to drop them in the comments. Anyways, I'm Jen with the Sewing Report. If you did find this video helpful, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe if you like sewing, quilting, and crafts. I am here and I've got plenty of other videos about reviews or even beginner sewing and quilting projects if you're very new to this world. Anyways, I'll see you guys again in the next video. And remember, whatever you're doing, make it fun.